The deafening blare of emergency alarms jolted Jake Volkov awake. His head throbbed as he tumbled from his bunk onto the cold metal floor of his quarters. Through bleary eyes, he glimpsed the pulsing red emergency lights. The ship's AI assistant announced in an eerily calm voice, "Atmospheric breach detected. Emergency protocols engaged. All personnel to evacuation stations." Jake scrambled to his feet, the metallic taste of adrenaline flooding his mouth. As the chief xenobiologist aboard the interstellar research vessel Horizon, he drilled for emergencies countless times, but nothing prepared him for the chaos unfolding in the corridors. Crew members rushed past him, oxygen masks secured tightly to their faces. Jake reached for the emergency mask beside his door, only to find the compartment empty. "Damn it," he muttered, his heart hammering against his ribcage. Without a mask, he'd have minutes at most if the ship's atmosphere was truly compromised. He needed to reach the emergency supply cabinet at the end of the corridor. Jake pushed against the flow of panicking crew members, fighting his way toward the supply cabinet. The ship lurched violently, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain flared in his shoulder, but he pressed forward. Something felt wrong about this emergency beyond the obvious chaos. The ship's movements were too controlled, almost deliberate. When he reached the cabinet, he found it ransacked. No masks remained. His lungs began to burn slightly, confirming his fears that whatever had breached the ship was affecting the air quality. Jake made a split-second decision and changed course toward the lab. If he couldn't find an oxygen supply, he'd need to seek shelter in one of the sealed research chambers. The corridor to the science deck was eerily deserted. The emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Jake's breathing grew labored as he pushed through the increasingly resistant automatic doors. By the time he reached the main laboratory, his vision had begun to blur at the edges. He slammed his hand against the biometric scanner, relief washing over him as the doors hissed open. Inside, he expected to find an empty lab. Instead, he froze at the threshold, struggling to comprehend the scene before him. 7 alien figures stood around the central holographic display. They weren't from any species the Horizon had encountered during its 5-year mission. Tall, with iridescent blue-green skin that seemed to shift and ripple like water, they had elongated limbs and facial features that were almost, but not quite, humanoid. Their eyes, 3 per being, were fixed on Jake with unmistakable surprise. "Subject has entered containment area," one of them said in perfect, unaccented English. The voice had an odd, resonant quality as though speaking through water. "Impossible," replied another, moving toward a panel of instruments. "The atmospheric modification should have rendered all humans unconscious within 8 minutes of exposure. This one should not be conscious, let alone mobile." Jake's mind raced to catch up with what he was hearing. Atmospheric modification. They had deliberately altered the ship's air. "The breach was their doing. What have you done to my ship?" Jake demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady despite the increasing difficulty breathing. "Who are you?" The apparent leader, distinguished by elaborate patterns etched into its skin, approached Jake with what appeared to be scientific curiosity rather than hostility. "Fascinating. The subject exhibits higher resistance than our models predicted. RASC, adjust your calculations." Jake took a step backward, his vision swimming. "I asked you a question. What have you done to my crew?" The leader tilted its head in a gesture almost reminiscent of confusion. "Your crew is unharmed, merely sedated. We are researchers from the Celqual collective. We have been observing your vessel for some time. Your species' biological adaptability presents interesting questions. Questions you decided to answer by gassing an entire ship." Jake's anger momentarily overpowered his fear. He backed toward a workstation, hoping to reach the emergency protocols hidden beneath. "A necessary precaution. Human unpredictability is well documented. We required controlled conditions for our study." The alien gestured to the holographic display, which showed detailed biological scans of what Jake recognized as human physiology. "Your atmosphere has been modified with a compound we developed specifically for human biology. It should be completely unbreathable to your species." Jake felt his knees weakening but forced himself to remain upright. "Well, you missed something in your calculations. I'm still standing." The aliens exchanged looks that Jake couldn't interpret. The leader made a motion with its upper limbs, and one of the others handed it a device that resembled a transparent tablet. Subject exhibits anomalous respiratory function. Preliminary analysis suggests genetic deviation from standard human baseline. The leader studied Jake with increasing interest. "You should not be conscious. The composition we introduced would bind to human hemoglobin, preventing oxygen transport, yet you continue to function, albeit with reduced efficiency." Jake's back bumped against the workstation. His fingers found the hidden panel beneath the counter's edge and pressed the emergency sequence 3 short, 1 long. If the ship systems were still operational, it would send a distress signal and lock down the lab. "Maybe your research isn't as thorough as you thought," Jake said, fighting to keep his voice steady as his vision darkened at the edges. He needed to keep them talking. "Humans are adaptable, like you said." The leader moved closer, its 3 eyes blinking in an unsettling, non-synchronized pattern. Perhaps a direct sample would provide clarity. It raised what appeared to be a medical instrument. Jake's lungs burned now, each breath a struggle. But he had one advantage: these aliens clearly expected him to be unconscious or dead from their atmospheric tampering. They weren't prepared for resistance. With the last of his strength, Jake lunged forward and shoved the alien leader backward into its companions. The unexpected movement created momentary confusion. Jake used the opportunity to grab a nearby fire extinguisher, a ridiculously old-school safety measure that had survived countless ship redesigns. He unleashed its contents into the face of the nearest alien, which recoiled with a high-pitched wailing sound. Alarms began blaring different from the earlier emergency signals. The lab's security protocols had activated. Mechanical locks engaged on the doors with heavy thunks. "Containment breach detected," announced the ship's AI. "Hostile entities identified. Emergency protocols engaged." The aliens moved with surprising speed, their movements fluid and coordinated despite their apparent surprise. 2 of them rushed to the control panels while the others formed a defensive formation. "The human has activated security measures," one reported. "Our override codes are being rejected." The leader fixed its gaze on Jake. "This was unnecessary. We meant no permanent harm to your species." Jake's legs finally gave out. He slid down against the workstation, struggling to remain conscious. "Then why?" he gasped. "Why tamper with our air?" "To observe your biological responses to extreme environmental stress. Your species' adaptability is unique in our catalog databases. We hypothesized that even in unbreathable conditions, humans might develop unexpected compensatory mechanisms." The leader approached Jake cautiously. "You are proving our hypothesis correct in ways we did not anticipate." Jake laughed weakly, tasting blood in his mouth. "So you're saying I'm breathing the unbreathable just to spite your scientific assumptions?" "Not spite. Evolution. Adaptation." The leader knelt beside Jake. "Your genetic profile indicates ancestral exposure to high-altitude environments. Your hemoglobin structure has subtle variations that allow oxygen binding even in our modified atmosphere." Jake's vision was tunneling now, darkness creeping in from all sides, but the alien's words sparked something in his fading consciousness. His maternal grandmother had grown up in the Andes Mountains, where generations of his family had lived at altitudes that would leave most visitors gasping. Could that really make a difference? The ship lurched violently, throwing the aliens off balance. Emergency containment fields activated, creating shimmering barriers throughout the lab. "Security breach in progress," the AI announced. "Countermeasures deployed, all crew to emergency stations." Jake realized what was happening. The ship's automated defense systems had detected the alien intrusion and were responding, but his crew, if what these aliens said was true, were all incapacitated. "You need to reverse whatever you did to the atmosphere," Jake managed, each word a painful effort. "My crew will die if they stay sedated too long." The leader studied Jake for a moment, its 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "Your concern for your companions is noted. However, our research protocols, forget your damn protocols. Jake interrupted, summoning strength from reserves he didn't know he had. This isn't research, it's an attack on my ship and crew. Another violent shudder ran through the ship, the lights flickered, and several of the aliens' instruments sparked and went dark. Primary systems compromised, one of the aliens reported. The vessel's defensive mechanisms are more sophisticated than our intelligence suggested. The leader seemed to come to a decision. Prepare for immediate extraction. Gather all data collected thus far. It turned back to Jake. Your biological resistance is remarkable. With further study, no further study, Jake gasped. Restore our atmosphere, or I'll make sure this ship's defenses target your extraction vessel. It was a bluff. Jake had no way of controlling the ship's weapons systems from the lab. But the aliens exchanged glances that suggested they weren't certain of the limits of his authority. Very well, the leader finally said. The atmospheric composition will be restored to human viable parameters. But know this, Jake Volkov, your species has attracted attention far beyond our research collective. Your adaptability makes you both fascinating and potentially threatening. Jake's surprise at hearing his name must have shown on his face, because the leader made a gesture that might have been the alien equivalent of a smile. Yes, we know who you are, chief xenobiologist with specialty in comparative respiratory systems. The irony of your particular resistance to our atmospheric modification is not lost on us. The aliens moved with coordinated precision, activating devices that emitted pulses of blue light. Almost immediately, Jake felt the air change. The burning in his lungs began to subside, and he found himself able to draw deeper breaths. Atmospheric restoration initiated, one of the aliens confirmed. Human viable conditions will be achieved in approximately 3 minutes. The leader approached Jake once more. Our encounter has been educational, though not as controlled as we had planned. Perhaps next time there won't be a next time, Jake interrupted, his voice stronger now. I'm going to make sure every human ship knows about your research methods. The leader made a sound that might have been laughter. Bold statement, considering you have no proof of our existence. When your crew awakens, they will remember only a minor atmospheric regulation malfunction. Before Jake could respond, the aliens shimmered and began to fade from view. Some kind of teleportation technology, he realized, far beyond anything humans had developed. Your species continues to surprise us, Jake Volkov. The leader's voice echoed as its form became transparent. We will be watching your progress with great interest. Then they were gone, leaving Jake alone in the lab with only the fading alarms and the gradually improving air quality as evidence they'd ever been there. Jake sat on the floor for several minutes, taking deep breaths of the clearing air. His mind raced with implications. An alien species had been studying humans without their knowledge, with technology advanced enough to bypass all of the Horizon's security systems. And they'd singled him out, somehow knowing of his unusual genetic heritage. When he felt strong enough, Jake pulled himself to his feet and made his way to the nearest communication panel. This is Chief Science Officer Volkov. Status report on all crew members. The ship's AI responded promptly. All crew showing signs of regaining consciousness. Atmospheric systems returning to normal parameters. Medical teams are responding to 23 reports of respiratory distress, all non-critical. Jake leaned against the wall, relief washing over him. Whatever these Celqual aliens had done, it appeared to be temporary. But the questions they'd raised would linger long after this incident. AI, begin full diagnostic of all ship systems. Priority on identifying any unauthorized alterations to our environmental controls. Working, the AI responded. Preliminary analysis indicates sophisticated external tampering with atmospheric regulation systems. Origin technology does not match any known signatures in database. Jake wasn't surprised. Record everything you can about the technology signatures. And prepare the medical bay. I need a full analysis of my blood work compared to baseline human standards. Acknowledged, Officer Volkov. Medical bay ready in 5 minutes. Captain Harrison is requesting your presence on the bridge as soon as possible. Of course she was. Jake would have a lot of explaining to do, with very little concrete evidence to support his explanation. How do you tell your captain that aliens invaded the ship specifically to see how humans would react to unbreathable air? As Jake made his way toward the bridge, crew members were gradually returning to their stations, looking dazed and confused. Many showed signs of what appeared to be minor altitude sickness headaches, disorientation, nausea. The ship's medical team moved efficiently through the corridors, checking vital signs and administering supplemental oxygen where needed. Captain Eliza Harrison was already on the bridge when Jake arrived, her normally composed demeanor showing signs of strain. Her short gray hair was disheveled, and her uniform bore evidence of a fall probably when the sedative effect had first hit her. "Volkov," she acknowledged with a nod. "What the hell happened to my ship?" Jake took a deep breath, a action he now appreciated far more than he had hours earlier. "Captain, I know this is going to sound incredible, but we were boarded by an alien research team conducting experiments on human respiratory adaptability." The bridge crew exchanged skeptical glances, but Captain Harrison's expression remained neutral. She'd been in deep space long enough to know that incredible didn't mean impossible. "Explain," she said simply. Jake recounted everything: the aliens, their atmospheric tampering, their stated research purpose, and their apparent surprise at his ability to remain conscious and functional in what should have been lethal conditions. When he finished, the bridge was silent. Captain Harrison studied him for a long moment before turning to her science officer. "Lieutenant Chen, any evidence supporting Officer Volkov's account?" Lieutenant Chen looked up from his console. "Environmental logs show an unknown compound was introduced into our atmospheric system approximately 40 minutes before the alarm sounded. The compound's molecular structure is unusual. Nothing in our database matches it." "And security systems?" Harrison pressed. "That's where it gets strange, Captain," Chen replied. "According to the logs, nothing entered or left the ship. No airlock activations, no hull breaches, no unusual energy signatures. Except what, Lieutenant? There's a 12-minute gap in our sensor records, just nothing. As if the systems were completely offline, but they show as functioning normally during that time." Harrison turned back to Jake. "And you're certain these aliens called themselves the Celqual Collective?" Jake nodded. "They seemed surprised I was conscious. Said something about my genetic background making me more resistant to their atmospheric modifications. My grandmother grew up at high altitude in the Andes. Apparently that makes a difference." "Medical, confirm," Harrison directed to the ship's doctor who had joined them on the bridge. "Doctor." Patel nodded. "It's possible. People with generations of high-altitude ancestry often have physiological adaptations: increased lung capacity, more efficient oxygen transport, different hemoglobin binding properties. I'd need to run tests on Officer Volkov to confirm, but it's a plausible explanation for why he might have remained conscious longer than the rest of us." Harrison paced the bridge, considering all she'd heard. "So an advanced alien species bypassed all our security, altered our atmosphere to conduct experiments on how humans respond to respiratory stress, and then just left when Volkov confronted them. They mentioned extraction when the ship's defenses started to activate," Jake added. "I think they weren't expecting resistance, automated or otherwise." Harrison stopped her pacing. "Lieutenant Chen, I want every second of sensor data from the past 6 hours analyzed. Find that gap and figure out how they created it. Doctor." Patel, full medical workups on all crew members with special attention to respiratory function. "And Officer Volkov?" "Yes, Captain. Report to medical for a complete examination. I want to know exactly why you were able to breathe what these aliens declared unbreathable." The following days aboard the Horizon were tense. Jake underwent a battery of tests that confirmed Dr. Patel's hypothesis: his genetic heritage had indeed granted him unusual respiratory efficiency. His blood showed higher concentrations of 23-bisphosphoglycerate, a compound that facilitates oxygen release from hemoglobin in low oxygen environments, as well as slightly elevated red blood cell counts. "Fascinating," Dr. Patel said, reviewing the results. Your body essentially operates as if you're permanently at high altitude. The modifications these aliens made to our atmosphere would have affected you less severely than the average human. Lucky accident of birth, Jake muttered, flexing his arm where multiple blood draws had left it bruised and sore. Perhaps not so accidental in the larger scheme, Dr. Patel suggested. If these aliens have been studying humans for some time, they may have been aware of such variations within our species. Your presence on this ship might not have been coincidental. The doctor's words sent an uncomfortable chill through Jake. Could his assignment to the horizon have been manipulated? Had these Celqual been watching him specifically? Meanwhile, Lieutenant Chen and his team had made disturbing discoveries about the security breach. The 12-minute gap in the ship's sensors hadn't been caused by a system malfunction. The sensors had been operating normally, but something had prevented them from recording any data. It's like they exist in a different phase of reality, Chen explained during a briefing. They can interact with our environment when they choose to, but can also simply step sideways, for lack of a better term. Captain Harrison's expression darkened. That's a significant technological advantage if they can board any human vessel at will. Exactly, Chen nodded. We've been operating under the assumption that our security systems would detect any intrusion. This changes everything. Jake thought about the aliens' parting words that humans had attracted attention beyond their research collective. Captain, I think we need to consider the possibility that the Celqual aren't the only ones watching us. Harrison nodded grimly. Already on it, Volkov. I've prepared a full report for Earth Command, classified at the highest level, but until we receive instructions, we continue our mission. Jake wasn't surprised by the captain's decision. The horizon was 3 months from the nearest human outpost. Turning back now would mean abandoning years of research. But the thought of continuing as if nothing had happened didn't sit well with him. Captain, with respect, shouldn't we be taking additional precautions? If these aliens can bypass our security so completely, what would you suggest, Officer Volkov? Harrison interrupted. We can't defend against technology we don't understand. The best defense is to gather more information, which is exactly what we'll do. Starting with you spending more time in the lab analyzing that atmospheric compound they introduced. Jake recognized the dismissal in her tone and nodded. Yes, Captain. Over the next week, Jake dedicated himself to analyzing the residual traces of the alien compound. Its molecular structure was unlike anything in human chemical databases, a complex arrangement that seemed designed specifically to bind with human hemoglobin without causing permanent damage. It's almost elegant, he admitted to Dr. Patel as they reviewed the results together. It temporarily blocks oxygen-binding sites without destroying the red blood cells, like a perfect anesthetic that works on the molecular level, suggesting a deep understanding of human biology, Doctor. Patel observed, far beyond what we'd expect from a species we've never encountered before. The implications hung between them, unspoken but understood. These aliens had been studying humans for a very long time. Jake was working late in the lab, cross-referencing the compound against known cosmic elements, when the lights flickered. A momentary power fluctuation normally not cause for alarm on a starship where minor system adjustments happened constantly. But Jake froze, suddenly alert. The air felt different, heavier somehow with a subtle scent he recognized from before. No, he whispered, reaching for the emergency communicator. Before his fingers could touch it, the device shimmered and seemed to phase out of existence. Your observational instincts are impressive, Jake Volkov, came a familiar, resonant voice. Jake spun around to find the alien leader standing behind him, its iridescent skin catching the lab lights in hypnotic patterns. You're not supposed to be here, Jake said, backing away slowly. How did you get past our security? The alien made a gesture that might have been dismissive. Your ship's defensive adaptations were noted and accounted for. We simply adjusted our approach. What do you want? You've already done your experiment. An incomplete experiment, unfortunately. The alien moved closer, its 3 eyes studying Jake with unsettling intensity. Your unexpected resistance created anomalies in our data. The collective requires clarification. Jake glanced toward the door. And if I refuse to be your lab rat? A colorful metaphor, but inaccurate. We do not view you as lesser beings, merely different. Your species' adaptability is worthy of study. You still haven't answered my question, Jake pressed. What happens if I refuse? The alien's skin rippled in what Jake was beginning to recognize as their equivalent of a shrug. Then we will find another subject, but your genetic anomalies make you uniquely valuable to our research. We are prepared to offer exchange, knowledge for knowledge. You allow us to complete our respiratory analysis, and we provide information about cosmic phenomena your species has yet to discover. Jake paused, genuinely tempted. As a scientist, the offer of advanced knowledge was almost irresistible, but he'd seen how these aliens operated. How do I know you won't just take what you want anyway? You've already shown you can bypass all our security. Because forced data is invariably flawed, the alien replied simply. Stress hormones alter respiratory patterns. We require natural responses. Jake considered his options. The alien stood between him and the door. No alarms had sounded, suggesting the Celqual had disabled those systems again. He had no way to alert the crew. What exactly would this analysis involve? He asked cautiously. The alien's skin brightened slightly excitement, perhaps. Minimal invasiveness. Monitoring your respiratory function while introducing controlled atmospheric variables, no permanent alterations to your biology, and the knowledge you're offering in return. Navigational coordinates to a system containing elements your periodic table has not yet cataloged. Elements with properties that would advance your propulsion technology by approximately 70 years, by our calculations. The offer was too specific, too tailored to be a random bargaining chip. These aliens had indeed been studying humans and the horizon specifically for some time. I need assurances, Jake said finally. No harm to me or my crew, no tampering with ship systems beyond what's necessary for your research, and I want the data you collect shared with me. The alien performed a complex gesture with its upper limbs. Acceptable terms with one condition. The knowledge we provide must remain confidential until your return to Earth space. We are selective about which species access certain information. Something in the alien's tone made Jake pause. There are others out here, aren't there? Others watching us. The cosmos teems with intelligence, Jake Volkov, not all observe with scientific objectivity. The alien moved toward what appeared to be an empty section of the lab. Your agreement, Jake took a deep breath. I agree to your terms on one additional condition. Captain Harrison is informed of our arrangement. The alien was still for a moment, its three eyes blinking in that unsettling asynchronous pattern. Acceptable, her presence may even provide useful comparative data. Before Jake could respond, the empty space beside the alien shimmered and seemed to fold inward, revealing what appeared to be an opening into another space, a portal of some kind. Through it, Jake glimpsed what looked like an advanced laboratory with curved, organic architecture unlike anything human designed. This way, Jake Volkov, we have much to learn from each other. Jake hesitated at the threshold. I should inform the captain first. She is already being contacted by another of our researchers, the alien assured him. Time within our research dimension passes differently. What will seem like hours to you will be merely minutes to your crew. Still hesitant, Jake stepped through the portal and immediately felt a change in the atmosphere, not unbreathable this time, but different. Richer somehow, as if each breath delivered more oxygen than should be possible. The laboratory beyond was both alien and familiar. Equipment that clearly served medical and scientific purposes lined the walls, though their design was fluid and organic rather than the angular efficiency of human technology. Other aliens moved about the space, their movements graceful and purposeful. Welcome to Observation Vessel Celqual, the leader said. I am Research Director Nexer, primary xenobiologist for human studies. You know my field, Jake observed. A fortuitous alignment. Your understanding of respiratory biology across species will facilitate more efficient communication about our research. Jake looked around the laboratory with a scientist's curiosity temporarily overriding his caution. How long have you been studying humans? By your temporal measurements, approximately 300 years. Initially from a distance, but with increasing proximity as your species developed space travel. Nexer guided Jake toward what appeared to be a central examination area. Your evolutionary adaptability is remarkably accelerated compared to most carbon-based life forms we've cataloged. You make us sound like particularly interesting insects, Jake remarked dryly. Nexer's skin rippled in what Jake was beginning to recognize as amusement. An imprecise analogy. We view humans as potential equals given sufficient time and development. Your species' capacity for adaptation under pressure suggests eventual capabilities that even we cannot fully predict. A door at the far end of the laboratory slid open, and Captain Harrison entered, accompanied by another Celqual researcher. Her expression was a mixture of scientific fascination and military wariness. "Officer Volkov," she acknowledged with a nod. "Apparently we've been invited to participate in an exchange of knowledge." "You agreed?" Jake asked, surprised. When offered the chance to advance human understanding of propulsion technology by 7 decades. "Yes, I agreed." Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly. "With appropriate safeguards, of course. Your captain insisted on certain parameters," Nexer explained, "including continuous communication with your vessel and the presence of your security chief." As if on cue, Chief Security Officer Ramirez entered through the same door, his hand resting near his sidearm despite the obviously alien environment where such weapons might be useless. "Now," Nexer continued, "shall we proceed with our exchange?" What followed was the most extraordinary research experience of Jake's life. The Celqual atmospheric tests were thorough but, as promised, non-invasive. They created various atmospheric mixtures, each technically unbreathable by standard human definitions, yet carefully calibrated to allow continued function with varying levels of efficiency. Jake found himself breathing compounds that should have been impossible to process, while Celqual scientists monitored his body's adaptations in real time. Captain Harrison underwent similar tests, though her responses differed significantly from Jake's, confirming the alien's interest in human genetic diversity. "Remarkable," Nexer observed after one particularly challenging breathing trial. "Your hemoglobin binding adaptation exceeds our theoretical models by 17%. Even accounting for your genetic heritage, this suggests human respiratory systems have greater modification potential than we anticipated. Is that why you're so interested in us?" Jake asked, still slightly breathless from the last test. "Our adaptation potential," Nexer exchanged glances with the other researchers before responding. "Partially, but there is another factor. Your species emerged and evolved in an environment considerably more variable than most intelligent life forms we have cataloged. Earth's atmospheric composition, temperature ranges, radiation exposure all exhibit fluctuations that would prove fatal to many species." "You're saying we're tough?" Captain Harrison interjected. "We are saying you are survivors," Nexer clarified, "a quality that has significance beyond mere scientific interest." Jake caught the hesitation. "What aren't you telling us?" Nexer's skin darkened, slightly concerned, perhaps. "The cosmos is ancient, with civilizations that span millions of your years. Some view emerging adaptable species as potential threats rather than potential equals." "And these others, they're watching us too?" Harrison asked sharply, inevitably. "Your radio transmissions alone have announced your presence to numerous civilizations. Most are merely curious or indifferent. Some are concerned. Concerned enough to do something about it." Ramirez spoke for the first time, his security training immediately identifying the potential threat. Nexer's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "That is partially why our research is so thorough. The more we understand human adaptability, the better we can assess where your species fits within the greater cosmic community." "You're evaluating whether we're a threat," Jake realized. "This isn't just scientific curiosity, you're deciding whether humans should be contained." "Not contained," Nexer corrected. "Guided, All emerging species face this transition period. Those with high adaptability and technological progress require particular attention. Captain Harrison straightened, her military bearing becoming more pronounced. I think this exchange has reached its conclusion. You've gathered your respiratory data. Now it's time for your part of the bargain. Nexer made a gesture, and one of the other researchers brought forward what appeared to be a crystalline data storage device. As agreed, navigational coordinates and preliminary analysis of the elements you will discover there. We have included safety protocols for handling these materials. Harrison accepted the device cautiously. And the conditions of our agreement stand. This information remains confidential until we return to Earth space. Correct, for your protection as much as ours. Nexer turned to Jake. Your biology has provided valuable insights, Jake Volkov. Your species' ability to breathe what our science declared unbreathable represents a microcosm of human potential. Adaptability is both your greatest strength and your greatest vulnerability. What does that mean? Jake pressed. It means that adaptability without wisdom leads to extinction. Throughout cosmic history, species that adapt quickly but lack ethical development tend to self-destruct or threaten others to the point where intervention becomes necessary. The warning was clear enough. Humans were being watched, evaluated, and judged not just by the Celqual but by older, possibly less patient civilizations. We should return to our ship, Harrison said firmly. I believe our exchange is complete. Nexer inclined his head in what seemed to be agreement. We will transport you directly to your bridge. Your crew will have noticed only a brief absence. As they prepared to leave, Jake had one final question. Will we see you again? Nexer's skin rippled with colors in a pattern Jake hadn't seen before. That depends entirely on what humans do with their remarkable adaptability, Jake Volkov. We will be watching your progress with great interest, as will others. The return to the horizon happened exactly as Nexer had described, a momentary transition that deposited them on the bridge, where Lieutenant Chen looked up in surprise. Captain, I thought you were in your quarters. Harrison checked her chronometer. How long were we gone, Lieutenant? Chen looked confused. Gone, Captain. You were on the bridge less than 5 minutes ago. You said you were going to rest before your next shift. Harrison exchanged glances with Jake and Ramirez. It seems our hosts were telling the truth about temporal differences. The crystalline device in Harrison's hand pulsed softly with an inner light. Earth Command would be very interested in its contents and in their encounter with the Celqual. But Jake couldn't shake Nexer's parting words about adaptability without wisdom. In the following days, analysis of the Celqual device revealed exactly what they had promised: coordinates to a previously unexplored star system, and detailed information about elements unknown to human science. The potential applications for propulsion technology were extraordinary, just as Nexer had claimed. But the device contained something else, a message encoded in a mathematical sequence that took Jake 3 days to decipher. When he finally understood it, he immediately requested a private meeting with Captain Harrison. The Celqual left us more than coordinates, he explained, displaying the decoded message on a secure terminal. They left us a warning. Harrison leaned forward, reading aloud. Observation continues by multiple civilizations. Designation: species with uncertain development trajectory. Monitoring status: active. Intervention protocols: prepared but not enacted. Recommendation: develop ethical frameworks commensurate with technological capabilities. She looked up at Jake, her expression grave. They're not just studying us, they're evaluating whether we're a threat to ourselves or others. Jake nodded. And they're not the only ones watching. The message includes reference markers for at least 6 other civilizations with active observation programs focused on Earth and human colonies. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. So breathing their unbreathable atmosphere was more than just an interesting data point for them. It was a test of our adaptability and potentially our unpredictability. I think so, Jake agreed. And I think they deliberately created conditions that would affect the crew but might spare someone with my genetic background. They wanted a controlled point of contact. The question is, did we pass their test? Harrison mused. Jake thought about Nexer's final words about adaptability and wisdom. I don't think it was a pass/fail scenario, Captain. I think it was the beginning of an evaluation that's still ongoing. Harrison straightened, her decision made. Then we continue as planned. We complete our mission, return to Earth with this information, and let Command decide how to proceed. But we maintain heightened security protocols, and we keep this information strictly classified for now. Jake nodded, though something still bothered him. Captain, do you think they're right? About adaptability without wisdom? Harrison's expression softened slightly. Look at human history, Volkov. We've adapted to every environment on Earth, developed technology at an accelerating pace, and expanded into space. But our ethical development has often lagged behind our technological capabilities. Maybe these Celqual have seen this pattern before with other species. And maybe they've seen how it ends, Jake added quietly. All the more reason to ensure it ends differently for humanity, Harrison replied firmly. Dismissed, Officer Volkov, we have work to do. As Jake left the captain's office, he found himself taking a deep, deliberate breath, appreciating the simple act in a way he never had before. Somewhere out there, alien scientists were still studying humanity, still analyzing their data on human respiratory adaptability, still deciding whether humans represented a cosmic threat or a cosmic possibility. And all because, when alien scientists had declared an atmosphere unbreathable, a human had taken a deep breath and survived. The Horizon continued its mission, carrying its crew and its secrets deeper into space. And Jake Volkov continued his work, now with the knowledge that every breath humanity took was being measured not just by human instruments, but by the watchful eyes of an ancient cosmic community, waiting to see what this adaptable, unpredictable species would do next.